Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast on North American literature hosted by the research group Studies in American Literature and Culture from the University of Granada. Today, I, Mohammed, will be your host and I will interview Kauthar. So, hello, Kauthar. Thank you for coming.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me today.
Well, in the podcast, you will explain to us a specific topic from this course, the influence of Herman Melville's The Confidence Man. His masquerade on Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Is that right?
Yes, it is. First, we will delve a little bit on some aspects of the historical context of both authors and on the works I have selected. Then, later on, we can start with the analytical contents of both texts.
So, shall we begin then?
Yes, perfect.
Well, tell us something about Herman Melville and his novel.
We could say that he felt the tensions of the eve of the Civil War, such as slavery, industrialization, or the Panic of 1857, which was an economic crisis due to the instability and overspeculation. Then he did not engage with the optimism derived from transcendentalism, which was very strange, but he has his reasons. He did not believe in human goodness. So his writing style constantly reflects the satire, philosophical dialogues, and allegories. His novel The Confidence Man contains these features while the figure of the confidence man is being developed in itself. The term confidence man actually exists, and the first mention of it was assigned to an American man called William Thompson, who stole a watch by gaining the confidence of his fellow man. This is what makes the novel truly American.
And what about Mark Twain and Huckleberry Finn?
Well, Mark Twain mostly experienced the Reconstruction era, which was after the Civil War, while people tried to integrate the newly freed black Americans in the southern states. However, racism was still in the air and as it was deeply embedded in American society. Therefore, Huck Finn embodies the American ideal of independence. He also uses satire to illustrate religion, education, family, law, and slavery. Since the story is set before the Civil War, it matches the setting of Melville's novel. And I can tell now a sad fact about him. Twain was a sailor, and he got to learn how to pilot a steamboat when he was young. At first, he was very happy about it, and in his book Life on the Mississippi, he still remembers his training when he writes, and I quote, "I went to work now to learn the shape of the river, and of all the eluding and ungraspable objects that I ever tried to get mine or hands on, that was the chief." As you can see, he still preserves some humor about it. Besides, his name itself comes from this era of his. Mark Twain is a term used by Mississippi boatmen and it means 2 fathoms or 3.6 meters of water, which is the depth needed for a boat to pass safely. However, the sad part comes with the death of his brother Henry. In 1858, both he and his brother were working at a steamboat called Pennsylvania. Twain abandoned the ship earlier because he had an argument with the pilot, but his brother kept on working as a second clerk at the ship. So, in June 13th, the boat exploded, and Henry received very fatal injuries which left him in his deathbed like a week until he died. This event will deeply mark Twain's life, to the point that he stopped working as a sailor. Once again, we find these nuances of criticism to this industrialization that promised a new future, but in the end, it will still something very new, very fresh. Curiously enough, a steamboat is the main play set in Melville's novel.
Okay, now that we have some background, I think we can start talking about the actual influence that Melville exerted on Twain. Am I correct?
Yes, indeed. My paper focuses on four central notions. First, we can elaborate on the notion of confidence and deception. Then, as both novels share the same place of actions, we will see how we can understand the symbolism of the Mississippi River and the boat. The next aspect is how social satire works in pre-war America and in racial conflicts. Last but not least, it is important to touch on the style. In this case, Twain seems to be really inspired by Melville.
Oh, overall, it sounds interesting. How are confidence and deception expressed in the text? How do they evolve from Melville to Twain?
Well, the confidence man tells the story of a man using confidence to steal money from people. The novel gives a meaning to this figure by using a biblical reference. It is a man who will make use of communication to deceive you by sweet talking you. Therefore, he will benefit by taking all your money and leaving you with nothing. This man will be the main character of this novel, and that is why the title is named as such. So Mark Twain takes this idea to portray the Duke and the King Huckleberry Finn. They disguise themselves as pitiable as possible and convince people cunningly to give them money. The perfect example of this can be seen from chapter 25 to chapter 29, when they take advantage of the innocence of the girls from the Wilkes family to get their inheritance. Fortunately, in the end, their deceit is detected and they do not snatch the money.
And how about Huck Finn himself? He also lies to get what he wants.
Yes, that's true. However, he's a different kind of confidence man. He's a trickster that is typically found in picaresque novels. His main quality is rascality, and this behavior seems to be justified in The Confidence Man. I quote, "My experience carried now through a course worse than salivation, a course of 35 boys, proves to me that boyhood is a natural state of rascality." Now then, besides, what really differentiates Huck from the confidence man is his sensibility, his goodness, and purity of action, since the confidence man always acts out of greed and falseness. Huck himself voices his opinion with respect to the Duke and the King and the Wilkes family. He said that this kind of deception, and I quote, was enough to make a body ashamed of the human race. So, they are totally different characters, but I understand that the terms can cause some kind of confusion, and it is important not to mix the basic notions. In short, the confidence man is used for male adults with bad intentions. They are like snakes that, thanks to their forked tongue and slender body, will try to drain money from people, and they don't even care about the social status of the current situation.
Very nice. Previously, you said that the Mississippi River and the boat are symbols. Could you further explain and provide more details about that? I would love to hear more about this.
Well, you see, both books happen in the Mississippi River, and they use a kind of boat to travel down the river. And in this boat, there is the development of a mini society. In Melville's novel, the riverboat is the main and only setting where the characters interact with each other. In here, they question the norms imposed by society. The limits between what is true and what is false no longer becomes evident. In Twain's novel, the raft is a home for Huck and Jim, where they can find safety, freedom, and comfort. And I will read to you the passage. "We said there were no home like a raft, after all. Other places do seem cramped up and smothery, but a raft don't. You feel mighty free and easy and comfortable on a raft." So this will allow them to grow as a person and forget the differences in colors or status. In essence, both authors use the river as a central motif, which creates somehow the metaphor of life as a journey. But Twain's treatment is more highlighted, illustrating the challenges that freedom involves. Twain as well picks just a plain raft in order to simplify the concept of society, and as I said before, he was still holding a grudge with steamboats.
Oh, it sounds so cool. That's an interesting perspective. Then, how is social satire detected in an America that was about to fall into war?
First of all, in Melville's novel there are traces of satire everywhere. One of them is the issue of speculation with the Black Rapids Coal Company. In Twain there is again the same problem, when Jim speculated cattle and money but gained nothing in return. Funnily enough, Jim is happy about it and he even believes that the money will come back sometime. Another major conflict in these narratives is how racism is treated. The theme of Indian hating is related to the story of Colonel Murdoch in The Confidence Man, since he thought it was a noble act to kill an Indian. In Huckleberry Finn this hatred is not quite present, but still they place Indians in an inferior level than white men. At the end of the book, Tom Sawyer really wishes to get dressed as an Indian and to live with them for a period of time to have adventures, as if it were an amusement park or as if the natives were clowns. I will read you the exact fragment in the novel. And then Tom he talked along and says, "Let's all three slide out of here one of these nights and get an outfit and go for howling adventures among the Indians over in the territory for a couple of weeks or so." So as you can see, this sounds crazy to say nowadays, but back then that was the norm. This was said by a child, so you can imagine the kind of education he has received in order to utter this without remorse.
It really seems tough to live in those days. Well, let's move on to the remaining topic, the style. The term is very general, so could you dive into it a little bit more deeply in order to make us see more clearly how Mark Twain has been influenced somehow by Melville?
Melville and Twain used different writing style, but both resort to irony when writing the stories. Melville points out a requirement that later will be applied to Huckleberry Finn as well. In chapter 35, the Cosmopolitan says that the story of Charles Moon is a story which he told with the purpose of every storyteller to amuse. Then Twain includes it in the notice before initiating Huck's account, and I quote, "Persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot." An essential aspect to consider is the use of regional dialect for black people. Melville uses it for the disguise as Black in Guinea when he introduces himself. Then Twain may have called this feature to represent the character of Jim and the rest of Southerners, so examples can be easily found in the novel. The last thing that we can say about the style, and by the way this is my favorite feature, is the use of dark romantic descriptions. For Melville, this was quite common because he befriended Nathaniel Hawthorne, so some of his influence can be seen in his works. However, in Twain, the situation is quite different. For most of the novel, nature seems to be an ally for Huck, but in some instances it only sends shiver to the poor child.
Could you give us an example?
Yeah, let's see. Look, in Huckleberry Finn, Huck feels the hostility of nature one night he was waiting for Tom Sawyer, and I will read the extract now. "I felt so lonesome I most wished I was dead. The stars was shining, and the leaves rustled in the woods ever so mournful, and I heard an owl away off hoo-hooing about somebody that was dead, and a whippoorwill and a dog crying about somebody that was going to die, and the wind was trying to whisper something to me, and I couldn't make out what it was, and so it made the cold shivers run over me. Then, away out in the woods, I heard that kind of a sound that a ghost makes when it wants to tell about something that's on its mind and can't make itself understood, and so can't rest easy in its grave, and has to go about that way every night grieving. I got so downhearted and scared, I did wish I had some company." As you can see, it really sounds deep for a child to feel like this. Then, in The Confidence Man, something mysterious and dark always lurks between the lines and around the ship. A fabulous example is the last lines of the novel. And I will read again. "The next moment the waning light expired, and with it the waning flames of the horn altar, and the waning halo round the robed man's brow. While in the darkness which ensued, the Cosmopolitan kindly led the old man away. Something further may follow of this masquerade." After all this, we can conclude that there are bits and pieces that are quite similar between them. Maybe Mark Twain hasn't had Melville in mind while writing The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but we could argue that he has been influenced by his novel in terms of themes, the star figures such as the Confidence Man himself, the use of irony to entertain the reader while criticizing society, and the style following obviously what I have just said. Overall, I really enjoyed reading both novels, but I should confess that I like Huckleberry Finn more, since the child is more humane and more innocent. It makes you feel more attached to Huck, honestly, so I couldn't restrain myself when I found out that I had an opportunity to write an essay about this novel, and to elaborate on possible influences he might have had. Now I fully understand why it is called the greatest American novel, and I hope you feel the same way.
Well, it seems we are out of time. The whole research has been fascinating and very thorough. Thank you for sharing it with us today and for commenting on your work very happily. We will see you next time, maybe with another captivating topic. Now, for the listeners, if you enjoyed this session, then you can check out the accounts for other podcasts on North American literature.